Welcome to Blade HQ, everybody, and welcome to Ready Gunner here in Orem, Utah. Back by popular demand, we have Patrick Odle. He is a civilian combatives instructor and an expert in all things martial arts, self-defense, firearms, you name it, and he teaches here at Ready Gunner. How you doing today?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. So last year we met up and we talked a little bit about how to use a self-defense knife, how to pick one, but a lot of the feedback we got said we want to learn how to use our folders, simple everyday carry knives. So I'm here as the noob, and we have Elliot here, Elliot's been training with you for years, yeah?
Yeah, it's been a few years now, and then before that, he trained with guys that I taught, so.
Okay, so he's gonna teach me some things as a noob, and he's gonna show us some of the more advanced techniques that you can learn after years of practice. And we're gonna teach you guys how to use your knives for self-defense. Let's talk knives. Before we get started in this video, we have a quick disclaimer for you.
Please keep in mind that everything that you're going to see is being practiced by trained professionals, as well as the fact that none of this is to be misconstrued as legal advice. If you do decide to move forward with training, please make sure you do it at your own pace and listen to your body.
If you want to learn more, you can seek out trained counsel in your area in both legal and self-defense matters. So Patrick, tell us a little more about what you do.
Well, I primarily work with military and law enforcement. I recently got approved for DoD instruction, so I've been working with Army intelligence and DoD intelligence factors. Other than that, I work with local law enforcement department in Las Vegas area. I just signed up with them too, out in Mesquite. So I do a lot of private lessons. I have people that come at me with like individual needs, and maybe they're trying to prepare their kids before they go off to college, but a lot of the people that I train, they actually rely on these tactics to survive in the field.
Okay, so you're not just LARPing around all day. You are... in the weeds with professionals, and you're making sure the stuff is done right.
Yeah, and I'm working with people that really need this material. You know, they're people that aren't necessarily like tourists or hobbyists, but I do also teach civilian classes. I get a lot of joy out of teaching the public. It's just at the same time, I really thrive off of teaching people that rely on these tactics to stay alive.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly grateful that you come and teach here in Orem. I live here in Orem, and knowing that there's a good guy like you helping us keep ourselves safe is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's nice to contribute to my community here.
Okay, so today I carried a self-defense knife. Let me drop it real quick. Today I carried my MKM TPF defense, and I did that because last year we talked a little bit about this sort of thing, but a lot of us are just carrying a simple folder every day. So we were talking a little earlier, and you were saying that the fundamentals of edged defense extend from the tiniest pakal all the way to the biggest machetes. So can we talk a little more about that?
Absolutely. So in most of the styles that I teach are out of Philippines. I did learn some tactical knife that came from some military sources, but when you start learning the blade from the Filipino systems, it generally is taught through a rattan or like a bamboo stick. And they start you from the longest blade size down to the smallest blade size, and then you learn the empty hand translation of the same techniques. So because they're an edged weapon culture, like if you were to go anywhere in South America, people are walking down the street, like in the public, in commercial areas with a full-blown machete dangling off their leg. So to get comfortable with that long blade and try to maintain as much distance as you can from an aggressor, or so to speak, if I were to have a pistol, that's great if we're in a pistol fight. But if I'm in a rifle fight and I have a pistol, being able to work from the same range is very difficult. So if I have a folder and they have a machete, I'm kind of at a disparity, right? So you learn your long blades, and then as you get more and more skilled, you learn how to close distance and change that proximity. You know, so and if I had no weapon at all, a lot of the same concepts would translate.
Okay, so you brought a long-bladed trainer over here.
Yeah,
Let's pull that thing out and show it.
Let me grab that. So this is basically a short machete. I've seen them as long as 26, 27 inches. But this little guy here is enough to get the point across, I think, without it becoming too much of a fencing match.
Yeah, I mean, we are indoors right now, so.
Yeah.
Let's keep the ceiling intact.
Right. So with this guy, the idea is that you want to have the blade lineating with your knuckles. It's very easy to start hitting with the sides of it and getting sloppy. So if you think of your geometry of moving with a blade like this, you want to be able to move fluidly. So even just a simple pattern like making an X pattern or going with an X pattern upward, getting fluid with this geometry creates kind of like a little force field in front of me. And it's kind of like, you know, having to close into a blender to get to where I'm at. So then you start adding like horizontal lines. So if I do my basic X and my upward motions and I have horizontal lines and thrusts, so you see that just getting comfortable with the movement of a longer blade could take a little bit of time. So, but it's something that I've even told my students, if you don't have a big budget, you can go down and get a machete from one of your box stores and then just dull the edge. We make our training machetes by putting a little bit of split air line and then wrapping it with duct tape over that. So you could take a basic machete that's $10 and drop the edge off of it, fatten up the edge a little bit in case you bump into each other. But this just gives you a training tool that would emulate that long blade.
Okay. So I'll be a slow aggressor here. I'll let Elliot do the fun stuff. But so if I come and I just go here?
Ideally, what I'm looking at is what's nearest to me, especially if I have a long blade.
Okay.
To reach for you is really unnecessary. So even if while you're going to cut, I go to cut here, or I thrust in, or I thrust over. Now all of a sudden, this blade, I don't have to be super close to you. Or I could try to strike the attacking limb itself.
That would hurt real bad, Patrick.
Yeah, there was a video going around not too long ago where two guys were in a machete fight, and one of the guys went to go and get his empty hand in there, got his hand cut clean off.
Ooh.
You know, and continued
I was going to
fighting.
say we should put that video in B-roll, but I think we
Continued
might not.
fighting for several minutes, you know.
Dang.
So, I mean, you'd be really surprised what your momentum and me just meeting that could do. And also, you have less of a chance of having like a lethal response. I mean, it may be justified depending on where you're at. But to attack the weapon that you're coming at me with versus thrusting into the trunk or cutting something that would create a lethal response might be most suitable. So if I were to pass this and cut it or thrust into it, now I'm limiting the amount of force that I use. So being able to justify that legally might be a little bit more ideal, right? So even if I go to strike and you pass me, like you deal with my threat the same way, right?
Yeah, pass.
Now I'm looking for where my openings are.
And because you've practiced those X movements and you're so fluid, that opening is just...
that's that same horizontal movement that I was working just earlier.
Okay.
So if you get really comfortable with your fluidity, you learn to find an economy of motion. So I encourage my students to pick up their training blade or their stick for at least 15 minutes a day, you know, and you think about it, in a year, that's just under 100 hours of familiarity with that a weapon, whether it's a short blade or a long blade. So those same concepts, if I may grab another one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Even if I've got just a simple folder, right? If I can get this guy open, now you're coming at me for me to attack that limb. I'm working these same kinds of concepts, and that's my X pattern, right?
Yeah, so if I sweep...
Yeah, and then I'm looking for that horizontal cut line again, just like I did with the long blade. So if you think of my X pattern that I was working before, if I cut up and back down, if you attack me, and I cut up and back down, it's just that same familiarity with that geometry. Mm-hmm. So the more that I can manipulate and move this knife, the more comfortable I'm going to be trying to react under pressure. And really the way it was taught to me by the grandmaster that I'd say really taught me the most is that it becomes palm orientation. My palm is up, my palm is down. My palm is up, my palm is down. Just being able to simply articulate my palm orientation, this keeps me powerful. And I'm switching off different muscle groups as I work each direction. So the most important thing I think really is making sure that your knuckles are in alignment with the blade. So even if I had no tool at all, I would be simulating these movements with that line of my knuckles. So, but something like this, if it's in the right hands, now for me to work even towards the trunk and working that X pattern, I'm just coming down one side and down the other, but I'm learning to deal with the strike. So one of the easiest ways to get comfortable dealing with the strike is for me to pass, and then now you pass. And we just get comfortable with these basic drills of how to move an aggressor coming at you. So now, if I need to use the blade, right, I can open, and then I can cut and cut.
And then, well, you've practiced those horizontal strikes too. If I'm used to throwing this.
If you're throwing that, I can catch that horizontal strike on the way through, or maybe work to a low line there. So all of a sudden, it's just, these are basic movements, and we're not just practicing trying to cut, but surviving the initial attack to get the opportunity to cut. So while I move, now if I needed to, I can work with my blade and I can get in and work my angles. But I really feel like the most overlooked aspect of edged weapon defense is working the deployment, you know?
Okay.
So if this is what I'm going to carry, I would say the biggest factor really is practicing getting it out under pressure and getting it open. This is a little bit stiffer of a blade here, but you'd be surprised by just taking out a couple parts here and polishing this up just a little bit. You
Just
can
maintaining
really
your knife like you always do.
smooth the action out a little bit, right? Even if I don't get it all the way open, a little flick of my wrist, I can get more comfortable with getting this open in different types of configurations, to where if I want to work a reverse grip or I want to work my forward grip, then this gives me different options. But just building that dexterity to be able to get the weapon out under pressure.
So last year we went to lunch, and you were telling me that when you and your girlfriend are watching movies at night, sometimes you'll practice your draw by picking a bad guy in the movie, just a character. Every time you see him, you draw. That's something that you could just do at home with your knife and get really good at that deployment, right?
Yeah, because like if I'm working here, right, if I can get comfortable figuring out an economical way to deploy my blade, now I've just got to get the tool open without having to like physically get a visual on where my placement is, orienting my hand in a way that makes sense for the deployment. So that's why with some of these newer blades, if you don't break it in and actually get it open and get it closed, I mean, just like a gun, when you buy a gun brand new, the action's all really tight, the springs are all really tight, but through using it, the metal on metal polishes itself. And that's the same thing that happens in here. If you just opened and closed this a couple thousand times through practice,
It'll be slick as butter.
Yeah, you would just keep it well oiled, right? So all in all, having different blades, I'm a firm believer in fixed blades ideally, because then I have less of a micro gesture that I'm trying to do under pressure to get the tool open. Another thing that I'll do is, if necessary, while I'm under pressure, I'll do my initial deployment. And then if I'm dealing with a threat, then I'll work on getting it open later in the process, because I have a heck of an impact tool here, even if I don't get this open. You know, if you think of getting this out, even if I had to smash the hand with this folded blade,
Break a bone.
yeah, very
It would
easily.
make punching hurt
But
real
if
bad.
you think about other targets, if you were to attack, for me to hammer to the temple or the jawline or the side of the neck, there's a lot that you can do with these folders without it becoming a knife just yet, you know? That's why I like things with like your traditional, like the Bram Frank, the ramp, or, you know, your Elvia wave, because I can get that out. I still have an impact tool. And then if I need to open it off of you, I can.
That would
Or
be a
if I
pretty
need to-
disrespect move. I opened my knife off of you.
Yeah, and it's about building dexterity and familiarity with the tool. So, but as you see, just a simple drill like this, you could spend an hour working on this and it wouldn't be time wasted, you know, integrating into deployment. Now, there are other ways of dealing with a strike. For instance, if I have this in my pocket, I could meet you. Instead of trying to pass your energy by, I could just try to obstruct it, and then now I could jam you with the impact weapon. And that may create enough space to where it changes your mood altogether, and now I have time to get my knife open. In the state
Time to get away even.
Yeah, disengage entirely, right? So in the state of Utah here, brandishing, if I were to show a weapon, it's considered an act of de-escalation. But certain states, if you don't know the laws, it would be considered aggression. So really understanding what your options are with your geographic location.
And training within the rules and setting yourself up.
Yeah, setting yourself up to be successful. That way, if you have an officer show up on site and things are misconstrued or misperceived, then you're at least in a position to say, no, I was in fear for my life, he attacked me, I jammed him up, I opened up my knife and I created space, I gave verbal commands. So any of these things that you can do in the self-defense world to insulate you from unnecessary liability. So when you see a knife as just a metal tool that you can cut or poke with, it's very limiting. So I think that these are some of the most underrated aspects of a folder in general. When I have a fixed blade, when I pull it out, it's a knife.
Yep.
Very plainly. So just different things to think about.
So we talked about some of the basics here, but I want to see some of the training that happens with somebody that's got a little more experience. So let's bring Elliot on, and I want to see some more of these advanced techniques that you're doing.
Absolutely. So I have Elliot here. He actually helps me with a lot of my classes and oversees them when I'm away. But what we're going to do is we're going to show you some of those other examples of ways of dealing with an attack. Elliot can attack on any angle that he wants to. What I'm doing is I'm just trying to practice getting the blade onto flesh. So if he obstructs me, then I'm going to try to override or pass that, so that I'm just dealing with whatever organic types of obstructions or problems that he can create for me. So when I go to attack, I use the same line that we did with George. Now, when I'm working here, it's pretty easy for me to deal with all of these angles, and I'm practicing looking for different cut lines. So I might cut on the hand and looking to use the back edge of that machete. And I'm looking to try to re-angle and curve over his defenses. If he gets in my way, I'm looking to get past his defenses. And these are all examples of being able to get this bigger tool in at a close space. Because if Elliot doesn't have a weapon, he's going to be getting in close on me. Go ahead and set that aside. The idea is with even a shorter blade, now my space might change a little because I don't have as long of a tool, but even if he defends, I'm re-angling. Or if he defends, I'm rolling over and getting my cut on his limb. So I can move that and thrust in. Good. So as you see, the concepts don't really rely on a certain blade length to work. It just creates a little bit more necessity for me to articulate the edge. So, thank you, Elliot.
For sure.
So obviously Elliot has a lot more experience than I do, but like you said, like you were showing, those fundamentals just apply to everything. But I think one of the big ways to learn on your knife is a trainer.
Absolutely.
Now, my knife does not have a trainer yet, but you were showing me this. Tell me about this knife right here.
So this is actually based off of a very common Pikal design. Unfortunately, the company that makes this particular knife, every time I've tried to get one, they're sold out. They do very small drops, and the community's growing so quickly that it's difficult. If you don't set your alarm and get a purchase in within the first 2-3 minutes, everything's sold out. So what I did is I actually took the blade, traced it out, and I cut it out with a little bandsaw out of cutting board. I used 3/8 inch cutting board, and then I just routed off the edges and sanded it up a bit. And then with just some basic knowledge of Kydex sheaths, I made a sheath for it and clip. So I was able to take a knife that the live blade, can be $100+, and the trainer probably would have cost me, on the edge of $60. And it may or may not come with a sheath depending on what company I'm getting it from. But if you're one of those crafty folks and you want a specific blade, there's no reason why you can't makeshift a trainer, you know? Now, granted, with the right tools, I can do them, you know, I can make this whole setup in 45 minutes. But if you were willing to spend an hour or two, you could do it all by hand with sanding blocks, and it's actually almost like a Teflon-like material that those cutting boards are made out of.
Okay. So I think my TPF defense has a date with a cutting board, because I want to get practicing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, is if you send it with me for a week and, you know, swap out for your backup, you know, I'll follow up with a trainer for you and a sheath. That way you can run it, you know, because really getting comfortable, something like this where I was talking about the deployment, from concealed, now I need to be able to get to the blade and get it out without having to fumble around and feel that. So.
Yep, and then the next time when we're in the gym and you've got your trainer concealed and I come in with one of these.
I'm looking to make sure that I can get this under pressure, out and on target. So one of the big things that we do in our program is we have a shot timer hooked up to a sound reactive board, and I tell my students what you have is what you can get out in less than a second. Because if my knife is in my bag and my bag is over there and I have to fumble through the Mary Poppins handbag.
Excuse me, don't mug me yet. I got to get my bag.
Yeah, or if it's rolling around in my pocket, but my car keys are on top of it, you know? It really is a matter of what you can get out in less than a second and how good your defense is to buy you some time if you fumble that. So deploying from concealed is obviously a lot more difficult than having something that's exposed, because you know, if you think about like a hunting type situation, my knife is probably going to be on the exterior of my belt. It's probably going to be accessible even with my garment coverage. But when I'm carrying a knife, when I do like rescue work out of the country, or I'm doing something that's high profile, I have to conceal my weapon. I don't want to be any type of a target or get a second glance for any reason. So, you know, a lot of the instances that I teach people for that are, you know, intelligence or they're working in law enforcement, their knife is tucked behind their plate carrier. You know, with these intelligence guys, their knife is hidden. But it could be a two-handed deployment, or it could be single-handed so that I could still deal with a threat. So if I'm dealing with the threat, I can still deploy. But if I know that you're over there, I might be able to lift my garment and pull my knife with two hands.
You're ready for it.
Yeah, so practicing single-handed deployment, double-handed deployment, it's essential, but you can't do that if you don't have a trainer. So yeah, I think it's a really cool concept for people to start making their own trainers. That way there's really no excuse to not practicing the deployment.
Yep, and that same cutting board trick works on every folder, it works on every kitchen knife, it works on everything.
Yeah, I showed you a couple of examples, but really it's like some of these knives are in just such high demand, they can't keep up with the production, so.
Yeah. Okay, so if people want to learn from you, where can they find you?
Well, you can find my initial information and contact at mccdefense.com. But, you know, I'm also here at Ready Gunner. You can go to readygunnerco.com if you're here in the local Utah area. That's how you would sign up for my classes directly. But if you're looking into seminars or you want to set up a private training, you'd go to mccdefense.com.
Okay, and it sounds like the community of people who are training in self-defense is pretty big. So how can they find it in their area? Say they live in Kansas.
You know, I would say ideally if you're looking towards the edged weapon, then your key search term is going to be Filipino martial arts. You know, you're going to see different edged weapon experts. There are probably as many styles as there are islands in the Philippines. So, you know, you'll find that some of them specialize in close range or long range. So they're working more with the longer blades. Then you have other styles that will teach all three ranges, but it tends to be a very specific style to style.
Yeah, but the fundamentals, like you said, they apply to all of them. So
absolutely. That's why I was saying, even if you just picked up your knife and you started working your different descending and ascending X patterns and working in some horizontal lines, it would be a great start that you could do right there in your home.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Patrick, and for your expertise.
My pleasure.
We always love getting together with you. And thank you all for watching. You can find more content like this at bladehq.com. Check out Patrick over on Instagram. He's doing a lot of cool stuff. And thank you all for watching.